The president's biggest campaign donor, who was so close that Trump invited him to sleep at the White House, is now calling for him to be impeached and replaced by Vice President J.D. Vance. The man who was handed nearly unfettered access to the federal government is openly musing about forming his own political party. And the same guy, the billionaire backing the U.S. space program, he's now threatening to take his rockets and go home. What at this time yesterday was a one-sided attack on the president's signature spending bill is no longer just a policy disagreement, not even close. It has now become quite personal, as the president says he thinks he knows why.
Well, look, I've always liked Elon, and it's always very surprised. You saw the words he had for me, and he hasn't said anything about me that's bad. I'd rather have him criticize me than the bill, because the bill is incredible. It's the biggest cut in the history of our country. We've never cut.
Trump is refusing to back down, even as impeachment demands explode from Democrats and activist groups over basically everything he's done in his first few weeks back in office. Venezuela, the ICE crackdown, Greenland, the Epstein files, stonewalling, all of it. Now let's be clear about what's actually happening, because I don't want anyone thinking there's some unified congressional ultimatum where Democrats are formally demanding Trump resign right now. That's not the case. There's no official impeachment resolution that's been brought to a vote. There's no Speaker of the House issuing Trump a deadline. Nothing that dramatic is happening at the moment. But what is happening is that impeachment talk has gone from a fringe progressive position to being everywhere in Democratic politics. Multiple members of Congress are calling Trump's Venezuela operation an impeachable offense. Activist coalitions are launching massive Impeach Trump Again campaigns that claim over 1 million petition signatures. And Trump himself is telling Republicans behind closed doors that if they lose the House in November, he will get impeached. So today we're breaking down what Democrats and progressive groups are actually demanding when they call for impeachment over Venezuela, ICE, and the rest. Why Trump's response is pure defiance. What his warning to Republicans about the midterms tells us about his strategy. And, most importantly, whether impeachment becomes the defining issue of the 2026 midterms, or a political trap that could backfire on Democrats if swing voters think they're more focused on removing Trump than on real-life problems like inflation and public safety.
It's about $1.6 trillion in cuts. Elon's upset because we took the EV mandate, and which was a lot of money for electric vehicles, and they're having a hard time, the electric vehicles, and they want us to pay billions of dollars in subsidy. And Elon knew this from the beginning.
As Trump was speaking from the Oval Office, Elon Musk responded in real time, writing this, quote, "False. This bill was never shown to me even once and was passed in the dead of the night so fast that almost no one in Congress could even read it." And quote, "Whatever, keep the EV solar incentive cuts in the bill, even though no oil and gas subsidies are touched. Very unfair. But ditch the mountain of disgusting pork in the bill."
Man who was very happy when he stood behind the Oval desk, and even with the black eye, I said, "Do you want a little makeup? We'll get you a little makeup." But he said, "No, I don't think so," which is interesting. He's worn the hat. Trump was right about everything, and I am right about the great, big, beautiful bill. We call it a great, big, beautiful bill.
Let's start with what Democrats are actually saying and what specific actions they're pointing to, because that matters if you're trying to separate serious accountability from pure political noise. According to ABC News reporting, there's rising pressure inside the Democratic base and the Progressive Caucus to impeach Trump over a long list of alleged abuses. The Venezuela military operation, DOJ weaponization tied to Kash Patel's FBI purges, ICE abuses, including the Minneapolis shooting, stonewalling on the Epstein files, and a broader pattern of executive overreach. And this isn't just online activists yelling into the void. You've got sitting members of Congress, like Representative Dan Goldman and Representative Maxine Waters, publicly calling the Venezuela operation an impeachable offense, accusing Trump of unauthorized war-making, illegal regime change, and basically using force abroad in a way that Congress never approved. Waters, in particular, has argued that Trump launched a military operation without congressional authorization, violated the War Powers Resolution, and that using U.S. military force to remove a foreign government is exactly the kind of abuse of presidential power the impeachment clause was designed to address. At the same time, there's a coordinated activist push that's more organized than people realize. multiple groups have launched what they're branding as an Impeach Trump Again campaign. Organizations like Citizens Impeachment, the Removal Coalition, Free Speech for People, Women's March, and other progressive networks, all working to build public pressure and keep impeachment in the center of democratic politics. According to Breitbart reporting, which obviously isn't cheering this on, but documents the effort, this coalition has gathered over 1 million signatures across online petitions calling for impeachment. They're also pushing multiple impeachment resolutions that don't only target Trump, but also target officials like Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth over Venezuela and Attorney General Pam Bondi over Epstein-related stonewalling and alleged DOJ politicization. So the argument isn't narrow, it's comprehensive, that Trump and top officials have committed impeachable offenses across multiple policy arenas, and that the right response is impeachment and removal. And they're explicitly framing it as impeach Trump again, leaning into the fact he's already been impeached twice, portraying him as a repeat offender who keeps testing the limits and needs to finally be removed. Now, the substance varies depending on the issue. On Venezuela, the impeachment argument is the most straightforward. Democrats argue Trump launched a military operation that resulted in the capture and removal of a foreign head of state without congressional authorization. In their view, that violates the War Powers Framework and Congress's constitutional role in war-making, an abuse of power that rises to high crimes and misdemeanors. On ICE, the argument centers on civil rights violations and the Minneapolis shooting, where an innocent bystander was reportedly killed during an ICE raid. Democrats argue Trump's mass deportation agenda is being carried out in ways that violate constitutional protections, that aggressive tactics are leading to predictable tragedies, and that Trump's rhetoric pushing agents to be tough creates a climate where abuses become more likely. On the Epstein files, the claim is obstruction and cover-up, that Bondi and Trump are defying transparency requirements passed by Congress, protecting powerful people connected to Epstein, and that the stonewalling itself is an impeachable abuse of power. But here's where it gets politically complicated. Democratic leadership reportedly isn't fully on board with making impeachment the centerpiece of their 2026 strategy. According to that same ABC News reporting, party leaders are urging Democratic candidates to focus on cost of living issues, kitchen table economics, the stuff swing voters actually talk about. The fear is that impeachment, as a headline message, could make Democrats look like they're more interested in going after Trump than solving problems. So there's a real tension. The progressive base views impeachment as a moral imperative. Hold him accountable, use every tool, while the more pragmatic wing worries impeachment talk could cost winnable seats in swing districts, where voters might dislike Trump but still want Democrats talking about inflation, healthcare, and safety. And yes, some polling suggests that concern isn't imaginary. According to Truth Out reporting, Democratic voters overwhelmingly support impeachment, while independents are far more mixed, and some can interpret it as partisan overreach rather than legitimate accountability. That's the trap Democrats are trying to avoid. Their base demands impeachment, activists are organizing around it, and candidates are tempted to promise it. But the swing voters they need to win the House may be turned off if the party looks obsessed with removing Trump instead of laying out a practical plan. So leadership is trying to thread a needle. Acknowledge the accountability demands without letting impeachment swallow the entire midterm message. Now let's talk about Trump's response, because his reaction tells you a lot about his strategy and his mindset. Trump's answer is pure defiance. He's not moderating, he's not backing off. He's not trying to de-escalate to deny Democrats ammunition. He's doubling down on the exact policies driving the impeachment talk. And he's turning the threat of impeachment into a rallying cry for Republicans. At the January 6th House GOP retreat, Trump reportedly told Republican lawmakers flat out, "You have to win the midterms, because if we don't, they'll discover a reason to impeach me." He didn't say they might. He didn't say there's a risk. He framed it as inevitable. If Democrats win the House, he will be impeached. And notice the framing. They'll discover a reason. Not, they'll hold me accountable. Not, they'll respond to abuses. They'll discover a reason implies Democrats are just hunting for any excuse, and that impeachment would be illegitimate persecution, not constitutional oversight. That line matters because it's the core of Trump's political strategy here. He's not trying to win the merits of the argument. He's pre-labeling any future impeachment as a partisan witch hunt before it happens, no matter what evidence is presented. And that's effective with his base because they already believe Democrats have been out to get him for years. They already view the first two impeachments as hoaxes. So when Trump says Democrats will find a reason to impeach him, it confirms what they already believe, that it's about hatred of Trump, not Trump's conduct. This is Trump trying to inoculate himself. Define impeachment as illegitimate in advance so his supporters reject it automatically. But here's the irony. While he's framing impeachment as a fake threat, he's also doing nothing to reduce the pressure. Since the impeachment talk heated up, he's kept defending the Venezuela operation, kept pushing aggressive ICE enforcement despite the Minneapolis incident, kept stonewalling on Epstein through Bondi, and kept pressing forward with contentious moves like Patel's FBI purges despite lawsuits and backlash. He's not trying to calm the waters. He's leaning into it and daring Democrats to act. From Trump's perspective, that makes sense. His base rewards fighting, not compromising. Backing down would look like weakness. His entire brand is built on being the guy who won't apologize and won't change course because critics demand it. So even when defiance creates legal or political risk, he views staying hard as essential to keeping his coalition energized. There's also a practical calculation. Trump likely believes impeachment doesn't actually threaten his job. He's been impeached twice and wasn't removed either time, because removal requires a 2/3 Senate vote. Given modern partisanship, there's no obvious path to 67 senators voting to remove him unless something truly seismic happens. So even if Democrats win the House and impeach him, Trump can assume he'll survive as long as Republicans hold enough Senate seats to block conviction. That means impeachment becomes, in his mind, a political nuisance, bad headlines, chaos, distraction, but not the end of his presidency. And if that's the calculation, then impeachment doesn't constrain his behavior much. Trump's private warnings also reveal something else. He understands his political protection depends entirely on Republicans holding the House. Impeachment begins in the House. As long as Republicans control it, Democrats can impeach him, no matter how loud the activist pressure gets. If Democrats flip the House in November, that shield disappears, and Trump is almost certainly facing impeachment over Venezuela or some combination of allegations. So Trump is essentially making the midterms about protecting him. The message becomes, vote Republican or Democrats will impeach your president. That's a powerful motivator for the base, and it's strategic, because it reframes the midterms away from Trump's job performance. Normally, midterms are a referendum on the party in power, but Trump wants to turn 2026 into a referendum on whether voters will let Democrats go after him. Classic Trump misdirection. Don't let the election be about whether people approve of what I'm doing. Make it about whether they want to stop Democrats from persecuting me. Now, here's where things get genuinely complicated, and where both parties are taking risks. For Democrats, the impeachment question is a clash between what the base demands and what wins elections. The progressive base wants impeachment. They see it as necessary to check abuses of power. If Democrats win the House and don't impeach, activists will be furious, and turnout energy could collapse. But strategists fear the opposite. If Democrats run on impeachment as a top-line promise, swing voters in purple districts may read it as political revenge, not governing. And those voters decide close races. This is the dilemma. Lean into impeachment and risk losing independence, or soften the message to appeal to independence and risk demoralizing your base. For Republicans, Trump's strategy is smart but dangerous. It can juice turnout by turning impeachment into a protect Trump emergency, but it also risks provoking massive opposition energy. Every controversy that feeds impeachment talk, Venezuela, ICE raids, Epstein stonewalling, FBI purges, doesn't just fire up the left. It can also move persuadable voters who don't like chaos and don't like perceived lawlessness. And Trump's problem is that many of these issues aren't popular with the broader public, so he can't easily run on them. He has to run on something else, like stopping Democrats from impeaching him. That can work, but only if enough voters are more motivated by protect Trump than by punishing him for controversial actions. There's also a messaging risk for Democrats. How they impeach matters. A focused case, for example, a Venezuela-centered argument about war powers and unauthorized military action, is easier for normal voters to understand and could resonate even with people who aren't hardcore partisans. But a sprawling laundry list impeachment, Venezuela, ICE, Epstein, the Fed, Greenland, everything, could look like throwing everything at the wall and hoping something sticks. And Trump will absolutely frame it as Democrats trying to overturn the 2024 election because they can't accept he won. So if Democrats go forward, they'll have to be disciplined. Frame impeachment as a specific, serious abuse that voters can grasp, not just, we don't like Trump. And that leads to the bigger question the midterms will answer. Do voters still believe impeachment and congressional oversight can function as real accountability? Or has partisanship poisoned impeachment so badly that it's become political theater? Trump's base already views impeachment as a hoax mechanism. If Democrats impeach him a third time and it ends in the same partisan pattern, House impeaches, Senate acquits, does that just reinforce the idea that nothing matters and no one is accountable? Or do hearings and evidence actually shift public opinion enough to create real pressure, even without removal? The answer depends on whether Democrats can present evidence that shocks the public, whether any Republicans break ranks, which would add credibility, and whether impeachment hearings change the political environment in a meaningful way. Either way, the midterms become a proxy fight over accountability. Trump is already framing it that way: lose the House, get impeached. So he's telling voters the choice is simple: vote Republican to block impeachment, vote Democrat to enable it. And that might be the most honest framing we'll get of what 2026 is shaping up to be. Not a clean policy debate, but a raw fight over whether Congress should use its power to check Trump, or whether voters decide to protect him from that check. In November, we find out which message wins in the districts that matter: the message that Trump is dangerous and needs oversight, or the message that Democrats are obsessed with going after Trump and can't be trusted with power. Either way, impeachment has already become the gravitational center of the 2026 midterms, whether Democratic leadership wanted it that way or not. And Trump's fate and his party's fate will depend on how voters answer that basic question: accountability or protection.